This is the Global Broadcasting Service, serving remote outposts since 1928.
Hi, everyone. Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express monorail.
Caramba, we have something really big for you today.
Welcome, foolish mortals.
Now then, hang on to them hats and glasses, because this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
This is the DBC Pod with Phil Schoen and Jason Dodge. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's pod. This is the show for the week of October 17th, 2022. This week we focus on ways Walt Disney World has improved in recent years. It's not all doom and gloom. This week, our takes of under, over, and properly rated Walt Disney World resorts. I've got some that are not, I've never stayed at, but I've definitely visited. So this should be an interesting discussion. Top three makes its comeback into this week's show, so stay tuned for that. And DBC engagement on if Disney should have a second Halloween party at Walt Disney World. And spoilers, everybody was kind of like, I don't, whatever. We'll talk about that later. But first, we got to talk about what's going on in our Disney World and what everybody else is talking about. Phil, so what's going on this week?
Yeah, so probably the number one thing that people are talking about relates to Disney announcing that they will start having variable pricing for Genie Plus and continue that for the individual Lightning lanes as well. So what this means is instead of it being a flat charge that every day, previously at Walt Disney World, it was $15 every day for Genie Plus. At Disneyland, it was $20. Now there will be a range. So at Walt Disney World, which is where we tend to focus, it'll range between $15 and $22 a day. And you won't really know what it is until you wake up that morning and go to purchase Genie Plus. And so far also, they've only said that's what it'll be at least for the rest of October, meaning November, December, etc. could be even more than the max listed now of $22.
Here's my hot take, right?
Okay.
It needs to be more.
Yeah.
It needs to be more because at least at different parks. Right now, it's $15 to $22 flat for everything, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm. They haven't introduced that where it's changing by park. It's still the same,
it needs
no
to
matter
change
the
by
park.
It needs to be cheaper for every park that's not Magic Kingdom, because it's basically useless at every other park. I made a post on WDW Magic forums where it could be much more expensive at Magic Kingdom, and I will pay the cost because you can get definitely value for that. At Hollywood Studios, it's only valuable the later in the day you start at the park because of stacking, and it's really only useful for stacking in that park for the most part. At Epcot you don't need it at all. In Animal Kingdom, it's only useful if you want to get out of that park by like 11:30. You can guarantee you get on everything by 11:30 with Genie Plus. But then if that's important to you, get it. If not, have a wonderful time at the rest of the day at that park because you have plenty of time to do everything that's there. So, and the end all be all, it needs to be more expensive because less people need to use it for it to function properly. But we've been down that road before.
Yeah. So, and just for those of you who aren't aware, our understanding is the system is sort of designed with the idea that around 20% of guests would purchase Genie Plus and the rest would be doing standby. It's been closer to 50%. So their solution to this, I guess, is just to raise the price, hoping that deters some people, which I would think at least on the slower days it might, and like you said, for the non-Magic Kingdom parks, but I guess we'll have to see.
We'll see.
Along with this, they've also announced that the max price for individual Lightning lanes has also increased. So for example, for Rise of the Resistance, that is basically matching what Genie Plus has been each day. So for these weekend days, it's been $22, just like Genie Plus has. Interesting thing is that some of the other ones actually didn't go up to the max they'd seen before in the past. So for example, Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind had been $17 on the weekends. It was only $15 these last couple of days. So I don't know if they realized that that's the max kind of breaking point for that attraction, or if they're just hoping to maybe make that more attractive versus Genie Plus. I don't know, but they're playing around with the pricing of those as well. So I had put down here, does this change your strategy? But I guess you kind of went through that already.
Yeah.
I think for me, the one big, I'm kind of the same with you. I mean, first of all, I'm glad I pre-bought Genie Plus for my December trip. I did the math for our 3 days, assuming kind of the $22 max. We'd be saving about $95 over the 3 days just by having it pre-purchased versus at the $15 mark. So, hey, I'll take that. The other thing I thought of was just if as these individual lightning lane prices increase, we've never done Cosmic Rewind. Even if that's up to $20 or something like that, I'll still probably pay it once. But as it climbs up, I'm definitely not going to pay for things more than once, I think, per trip. Where in the past I might have with hopping and stuff like that. Now I think it's one thing to pay, $20 a person for one time on a ride. Doing that again a couple times during a trip, I think starts to get expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I spent the money twice on my last vacation because it was just my wife and I.
Sure.
Like, I don't mind spending $30 to beat the lines and go on the ride. But family of 5, not so much, because that's a good meal somewhere, or that's a couple really good snacks and drinks with the family type of thing. So I'd rather spend that money elsewhere. But you bring up a good point where if you got a whole family there and you're doing the hopping, you get an individual lightning lane, let's say for Flight of Passage, and then you hop over the Magic Kingdom, and are you doing Mine Train for that, or you have multiple days, you go to Magic Kingdom twice in your trip, 3 times in your trip? Are you paying for just your one day and
Exactly.
not getting the
Yeah,
next
that's
day?
what I was thinking of. Was like,
Yeah.
if we did hop to say Hollywood Studios twice, would we pay for Rise twice? I pay it once. I don't think I'm going to pay for it twice as it keeps kind of creeping up.
I don't even think I pay for Rise anymore at this point. Like, if I go, we've all been on it. If I really want to go, I'll either rope drop it or try to sneak on like in the last minute when the park
Yeah.
is closing, type of thing. But I don't think I don't think I'm spending all that extra money, especially since Savi's lightsabers are now $250 rather than
Yeah.
$200 type of thing. So I mean, money needs to
Well,
be spent elsewhere.
I was going to say, it comes back to what we've been talking about a lot. As they keep adding these add-ons, you kind of have to pick and choose where you're spending your
Yep,
money. So,
for sure.
speaking of spending money, Mon Cher Paul, which for those of you who don't know, is another restaurant in the France Pavilion in Epcot. This is the upscale restaurant that had been open but hadn't reopened since COVID. So they just announced finally that it will be reopening. It was always, more of a fine dining location. For example, on the dining plan, it took 2 credits. However, like a lot of things, they are now shifting to a prefix menu, and it sounds pretty fancy. They said allocate 2 hours of your time for this meal. They've indicated you have to be 10 years old, so no small children are allowed. And they
10?
indicated a 10, yeah.
I mean, like,
And
for if I'm spending this money, I don't want 10 and 11-year-olds
yeah.
running around either. Let's
I,
raise that
I
to
wonder if they
16.
picked that just because that's like a quote unquote Disney adult. But yeah, no, and I do know some teenagers and stuff like that who are into these fancy meals, but yet probably not too many 10-year-olds. But in any event, as Jason alluded to, the price point, they've announced that this will be at $195 per person plus tax and gratuity. And that includes, I think, a welcome drink that comes with your like a glass of champagne, but any wine pairings and stuff would be on top of that. So just for a price, I did kind of check this out because several people, I was talking with Skier Pete and some others are saying, look, at that point, you might as well spend a little bit more and go to Victoria and Albert's, which is, their Three Diamond restaurant and that sort of thing. And I did check their menu, which is even longer. You can take 3, 4, 5 hours, starts at $295. So obviously extra, but you're kind of getting into that ballpark of like, if I'm going to be spending that much per person, should I just go all the way and do
Yeah.
Victoria and Albert's?
Stop dipping your toe into like uber fine dining and just go all the way and get the guaranteed good meal rather than a new restaurant with an unknown attached to it. I guess.
So
I don't know.
we'll see what the reviews are. It just also seems interesting to have such a fine dining place inside the theme park where, I guess it's one thing if you're local or staying for a really long kind of trip, staying off property and you're coming just for that. But like, I can't imagine spending a whole day in Epcot being all like sweaty and stuff like that, and then having like a $200 meal. But
I mean, I could see for the people that would spend the money on this, like you spend a day somewhere and then you go in the evening, right? And this is like you went into park in the morning, whatever, that type of thing. So also, if you're going to a meal like this, you probably don't have a large family with a lot of small kids or teenagers running around because this is
correct, yeah,
probably more of an adult friends, couples type of trip. Like you either you're single with friends or you've got a significant other without children. I would imagine with something like this. Would I go to this? Probably not. I mean, on vacation, I'm probably not spending this type of money on a meal unless it's like a world class. Like I would do V&A's before I do this. And
yeah.
I'm probably not doing V&A's because I'm spending thousands upon thousands of dollars just to be there at this point. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So my wife and I have eaten at Victoria and Albert's once. We did it for our 10th anniversary. It was an amazing, probably the best meal we've ever had. So it definitely was like, I
Mhm.
get why it costs what it costs. But that was when we were down. We stayed off property. My in-laws were there, watched the kids, and we just went out for this nice meal. So if it's sort of, V&A light, but that kind of level,
Yeah.
then maybe I could see doing something similar. But yeah, to your point of, maybe do something in the morning, rest in the evening, and have, somebody watch the kids. Or if we did, another solo trip or something like that.
I mean, I guess I could see kind of spending this money if it was just my wife and I going down like we did this summer. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Like, there's part of me that said, yeah, let's do it because this is great. And then me sitting at home planning my next trip, and I'm like, I'm not spending that kind of. Who knows?
Exactly.
Who
Yeah.
knows?
Once you start adding up that and want, you're probably looking at $700-800
Well, I
for a
mean,
couple.
my wife and I did one of these dinners for our 10th anniversary. It wasn't at Disney World, but it
Yeah.
was, a 12-course meal with a wine pairing in each course, and it was a very pricey experience. It was well worth it, and the food
Yeah.
was absolutely amazing. So I guess it would have to be for an extremely important event, right?
Yeah.
Like a wedding anniversary or like a big like 50th birthday type of
Yeah.
thing, or something where you celebrate. I'm not Mr. Moneybag, so $200 a person is a decent amount for me.
Yep. And then the last news topic I was going to cover is that the 2021 theme park index is out. For people that not aware, the Global Attractions Attendance Report is annually published by the Themed Entertainment Association, TEA, and the Economics Practice at AECOM. I never know what that acronym stands for, but it's the one that comes out all the time, and that's basically what people use when they're trying to get, what was the attendance at Magic Kingdom, what was the attendance at Dollywood, or whatever it is, because none of these resorts or theme parks release the attendance figures, so they have to make all these estimates based on the how they're checking people daily and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But this one is sort of widely accepted as the most accurate, and some of the big takeaways from it are just that it does seem that attendance is starting to come back from the 2019 figure, which was the first year before COVID. Obviously 2020 was just a complete down year with the parks closed most of the year, so 2021 is kind of the first year headed back, still well short of the 2019 figure. So I think 2022 is going to be the real litmus
Yep.
test for where things stand. Some of the key takeaways, though, for among the 4 Disney parks, Hollywood Studios increased its position. It's now the second most attended of the 4 Walt Disney World parks. Previously, Epcot and Animal Kingdom were ahead of it. Animal Kingdom was actually second, Epcot third. The other thing that a lot of people are pointing to is that both of the Universal Orlando reports, so Universal Studios at Florida and Universal Studios Islands of Adventure, were second and third. So they were behind only the Magic Kingdom in Florida at Walt Disney World. So obviously a lot of people are taking this like, oh, people are attracted to what's going over there. They're trying to cater and increase their attendance. I do also think they were open either earlier or kind of more closer back to normal faster than Disney was.
Yep.
So we'll have to see how much of an impact that had. I do think, Universal is definitely closing the gap, but when 2022 comes out, we'll see if they've really kind of fully taken over some of those other Disney parks or not.
Yeah, I think 2022 is the real measuring stick to like the pecking order in Orlando and attendance levels. Yeah, you definitely have a great point. Orlando, I mean, Universal definitely had a better comeback strategy, I guess, if you want to call it something like that. But I do find it interesting that Universal can hang their hat on being number 2 and number 3 after being number 4, 5, or 6 in recent years. What doesn't surprise me is Hollywood Studios, because I was expecting those numbers to be there in 2022 if the pandemic had never happened, because Galaxy's Edge has just opened in 2019. Mickey's Minnie Runaway Railway opens in March of 2020, and with Toy Story had opened in, what was it, 2017, 2018? Did I get those? 2018,
I think
summer
so.
2018. That's a lot for that park. And that was all going to be starting saturating for those 2020 numbers. And I think we would have seen a similar result for that. And I think on message boards years ago, we were talking about that. You can't tell the impact of Galaxy's Edge until it's been out for like a full calendar year.
Right, because it opened very late in the calendar year. Yep.
So like 2020 is probably the first year that most travelers are not concerned that much anymore with the pandemic. Everything's basically open and without any kind of restrictions, that type of thing. So next year would be an interesting year to kind of measure everything.
Yep. But these are always interesting to come out, and I always find not just the totals, but then you can always divide by 365 to kind of figure out, okay, well, how many people are actually in these parks a day, and being surprised when it's like, wow, there's like averagely like 50,000 plus people in Magic Kingdom every day. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
And moving on from that, so that ends our news. I think our next topic is our takes, which I submitted in here, which was our properly rated and underrated resorts at Walt Disney World to stay at.
I'm excited about this one. The reason why I'm excited because I'm excited to irritate people with my options. We started putting some clips back on TikTok again. I put my Casey's overrated take, and that like skyrocketed like 6,000 views within like 4 hours. Apparently people either liked it or didn't like it, but shared it all over the place. So I want to start. We'll start with our overrated resorts to stay at Walt Disney World property, and I'm going to go first with the Polynesian as overrated, and only because I've never stayed there. Let me preface it but I've been to the resort. I've gone through it. I've been to Trader Sam's. Haven't eaten there, but I've gone through the grounds and everything else like that. And I think most resorts, the bedrooms and stuff like that are relatively equal when it comes to like comfort level and stuff like that. I mean, there's a variance, but not a great variance, right? You're not comparing the Polynesian to like a random Motel 6 on the side of a highway somewhere, right? So there's a certain floor to quality. I think it's overrated because again, like you're spending that much money, right? It's all about the value of what you're spending your money. You're spending $800 a night, $700 a night rack rate, and the views are nice. You can see the fireworks from the beach. That's okay. You're on the monorail. The pool's cool and everything else like that. But like, I don't think it's $800 a night, worth it. I mean, you're going to see what I think about monorail resorts and rest of the thing, but rest of this hour takes. But like, man, I think the Polynesian is just overrated as far as like the amount of like passion it gets. I guess I could say, right? It's a wonderful hotel, but I think you compare the Polynesian to the notoriety of it through everything else, and it just blows everything out of the water as far as like where people want to stay at. And I'm like, I don't get it for the money that you're spending. Am I crazy, Phil? Am I nuts?
So I understand where you're coming from, and when I get to my overrated, it's based on some similar things.
Right.
Cost definitely playing a role. I mean, I really like the Polynesian. I think that whole vibe is really cool.
Well, you're the tiki mug man.
Yeah, I'm kind of into the tiki thing and
it.
stuff like that. So I kind of get why there's so much merchandise and stuff for it, and just kind of like, yeah, like kind of being part of that vibe and wanting that culture and stuff like that. But at the same time, you're right. It's still just a room. You have to go outside. It's not even all connected. So if it's raining and you want to get from where, you might have to go outside and stuff. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely some drawbacks to the resort as well. And when you're spending that money, do you want any drawbacks? So.
Yep. I mean, I'm just comparing the cost, the notoriety of the resort, and then walking in, I'm like, I'm not blown away by everything, right? I mean, for me to spend that much money and with the reputation that it has, I was expecting to be blown away by the experience. I wasn't blown away. I was just, this is an amazing resort, but it's definitely not like Mecca of whatever.
Yeah. So my overrated resort is kind of for similar reasons, but I picked the Contemporary Resort.
Interesting.
We have stayed there and we enjoyed it. I mean, there's definitely, we had a theme park view room. This was years ago, and I got it on AP rate and stuff like that. So it's definitely at a price that'll never be seen again.
Yeah.
And there's obviously nothing like waking up in the morning and watching the Magic Kingdom come to life. I will say there's not much shade on the balcony, so it got really hot out there. And the rooms this was before they did the Incredibles makeover, but they were nice, but it was just kind of like this could be at any sort of mid-city Hilton or something like that.
Right.
The pool isn't anything special. The quick service is okay, and it's just like craziness in the atrium area, at the
that's true.
The Grand Concourse, and just the way you have to kind of go down and then back up to get to the monorails. It just, I don't know. There's a lot of great things about it, and it's cool to visit. And it's like, I know when we pulled up to it, my kids were blown away. Like, we're staying at the one where the monorail goes through. But like, after that gimmick kind of wears off, it's not necessarily the place I'd want to spend like a week or 10 days or something like that. So, given the cost that you're having to pay to stay there, to me, it's a bit overrated. That I think it's one of those kind of bucket list resorts for a lot of people,
Okay.
and I definitely can recommend checking it out once, but it's not something there's so many other resorts I want to check out or stay at again before I stay there again.
I want to comment, but I want to start what our properly rated resorts are. And my properly rated resort is the Contemporary. And I get a lot what you're saying, right? It's not a pretty resort, right? It's very form and function. But to me, form and function is a value, right?
Mhm.
So most of these resorts, I'm not going to a Walt Disney World resort to stay at a resort. I'm going there to go to the parks and dine and go, I'm doing things. I'm not like hanging out at the pool for 6 hours a day and then just staying there, right? So if I'm going to be spending that much money, I love the ability to just walk to the Magic Kingdom. Or if you had a long day at the Magic Kingdom, you do not have to wait for a bus or a monorail or a boat. You can walk right back to your room. And like me, I'll carry 2 kids in one arm and just march back to the room just to get ahead of the crowds and just get the day over with and into bed, right?
Mhm.
So I think it's probably right because people love it because it's on the monorail. People love it because it's close to the parks and you can see the fireworks and you're spending the money for that. And to me, I need access to the parks because even the monorail to me, from like, let's say the Poly, you still got to wait in line. You get in there. It's still got to through the loop. You got to stop at the Grand Flow. You get there. I mean, it's still a duration to get there. And
Mhm.
maybe you miss a monorail or maybe it's too crowded and you can't get on and you're still waiting early. I don't know, but like at the Contemporary, if all else fails, you could just hoof it to the Magic Kingdom walking on the sidewalk. So that's why I think the Contemporary is properly rated with its fanfare and cost.
So my properly rated is the Animal Kingdom Lodge. I think it's an incredibly beautiful resort. People love it when they go there. It's a lot of people I know have their DVC contracts there, and they love their stays there. It's very kind of a bit relaxing, and you can kind of escape. It's almost like a resort separate from the rest of the park, which obviously is pluses and minuses to that, but you can kind of feel a little bit more relaxed there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that everyone knows that, but everyone also knows the kind of the drawbacks, right? You were talking about being able to walk to a park, or here everything is a bus ride.
Yep.
Even Animal Kingdom Park, which is pretty close, you still have to take a bus. So it is pretty remote. The meals are good, but there's 2 different locations, and you either have to take a shuttle bus or walk between them. So I just put it as properly rated because I think a lot of people really like it, but they also recognize the drawbacks, and that's why it's maybe not as popular as other options would be because of that lack of access to the various parks.
I mean, a lot of people talk about the cons of this resort just because of travel time and location. But people praise it for its food. And I gotta say, it's the least expensive of all the deluxe resorts, right? You're
Hmm.
paying, you could get a rack rate sometimes at like $500 a night for a deluxe resort, and that's cheap compared to everything
Yeah,
else.
I know.
Not cheap, but like it's and you
Definitely
can get
cheaper.
cheaper, yes. But DVC rental is very accessible here, which
Yep.
is what you're doing. So yeah, I like this as properly rated because you the accommodations, it's a unique resort, right, with the animals and everything else. It's got great dining. You could spend a day at this resort and feel good about yourself. Like it's kind of resortish feeling. And I think the only other resort that's close to feeling like a resort where it's like all inclusive type of thing would probably be the Polynesian, but
Yep.
not at those prices. Let's talk about our most underrated resorts to stay at Walt Disney World property. I'm going to go, and I don't think I'm going to ruin your surprise of what your underrated resort is, but mine is the only moderate selected at this park. And I'm going to call it Caribbean Beach Resort. I don't know if it's recency bias or anything else like that, or that's where I'm staying in a couple weeks. I think it's underrated because it gets a lot of flack from the community. People say, "Oh, this is the worst modern at all. I would never stay there again," et cetera, et cetera. It has the worst layout. You have to walk so far. I mean, when I stayed there with the addition of the Skyliner, I think if you're staying somewhere close to the Riviera or somewhere close to Jamaica on the other side, it has some of the best access to half the parks. It's quiet, it's peaceful. A lot of people, oh, you have to wait online, et cetera, et cetera. I never had to wait online early in the morning. If you get up early enough, you can get right on it. Even at Epcot, when I'm coming home, when everybody else was getting out of the park, we kind of stayed aside, did one more lap around the World Showcase, and then got online. And the line just was backed up, but it moved, right? It's
Yeah.
just one mansion. It's like an omni mover. Everybody just gets loaded up. That's going to be even faster as people during busy times. They're going to refuse you your request is to ride by yourself. So they're going to load up 2 parties if they fit properly now. And the resort is pretty. It's got a nice pool for a moderate. It's got good dining. It's got the banana cabana that we've talked about that was on our list last week.
Yep.
So I think it's underrated, right? It's typically the least or one of the least expensive moderate resorts on property, and you have some of the best, I think, transportation to get everywhere else. So, Phil, what is your underrated resort to stay at Walt Disney?
Yeah, so my underrated one, and I must admit I haven't stayed here, but when I hear people who have stayed here and how much they enjoy it and stuff like that, I feel like the pros to this location are not considered very often, and that's Saratoga Springs. So that is one where you would have to rent DVC points and that sort of thing, or rent, they sometimes, if they're open, you can rent them, but they're larger accommodations. There's some of the more cost efficient, larger accommodations on property. And one of the, I think people downplay how you could, depending on where your room is, you can walk to Disney Springs. So you have so much dining and entertainment available to you there. It's also on the river, so you can take the boat ride to Disney Springs, or you can take the boat up to Port Orleans Riverside or Port Orleans French Quarter, which is super relaxing. Like this is just one of those places where, especially if I was doing fewer park days, or like if I had to go and I wasn't doing the parks but I had to stay on property, I think this is a really attractive option because of the space available to you, because of the proximity to Disney Springs. And I think the theming, they redid the rooms, they're really nice now. And I just think it's it kind of gets either not thought of at all or kind of bashed because it's not, staying at BLT Tower or, something like Bay Lake Tower or something like that. So
this is low key an excellent pick, I think, because you don't hear anybody having like a trip report from Saratoga Springs.
Right.
And like anytime you hear somebody staying at Saratoga Springs, it's because it was an accident where their room got messed up and they needed room. So they went from, Pop Century where the room got flooded and they put them in Saratoga Springs, right? Because they had room to put people in there. Or they wanted to plan a last minute trip and it's a DVC member and they wanted to get points. The only availability was at Saratoga Springs, because typically Saratoga Springs is the last place to lose or not have availability, 365 days a year, I think, at that point. And all your cons actually speak to like a kind of like a nice, like low key Disney World like trip where you get the boats, you get the kind of the parks a little bit. If you're not like a go park addict type of person, like you go for like a half a day or a morning or something like that, this is a pretty good option. I think I think it loses out because of its theme. It's not the most popular theming in the world, but it's a gorgeous resort.
Yep.
All right, Phil, that is our takes for this week. Excellent topic for I like it because I think it just explores, like it kind of opens people up. So like a lot of people get stuck at looking at the same resorts every single time, and I think kind of opens our eyes at people, or gets them irritated and they can start yelling at me for calling the Polynesian the most overrated place to stay.
Well, I was going to say either get irritated at you, or I'm sure there's some people out there that are saying like, "Thank you, I'm not the only person that thinks that." Right?
If that is you, please hit us up on social media. Which is where, Phil? Where can they hit us?
Yeah, so you can find us all over social media: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. Jason was saying we're back strong on TikTok, all at the DBC Pod, and of course our Discord server. And speaking of the Discord server, welcome our new member Matt_PC.
I think he's logging in through his computer, and that's why he's Matt_PC. But welcome to the community. We appreciate that. And moving right along, our topic, as we mentioned at the top of the show, is where has Walt Disney World improved in recent years? And Phil, this was your idea. You come up with the most brilliant topics at times, so I'm going to give you all the credit for that. What made you think? What sparked this idea?
So I think it sparked because I was going down some rabbit holes of negativity
Yes.
on message boards. There's just a lot of people, whether it's on WDW Magic or elsewhere, that they just get fixated on what's not there. And I think we've talked about this a little bit in the past. Like if you're, what we're calling chasing the dragon, that you want that trip you had 10, 15 years ago, it doesn't exist. It's a new world. And yeah, it's more expensive. And some things are definitely not as good as they used to be.
Well, let me jump in here, right? Because there was somebody, because you mentioned WDW Magic,
Yeah.
and they have a very large vocal, well, maybe it's not very large, a very small vocal contingent of just negative Nancy's all day long. That's too expensive, and they're yelling at the CEO and saying all these other things. Some of them are valid criticisms, and some aren't. Or some of just their opinion, right? It's typically when you've been going to the same place for decades upon decades, you're going to get used to certain things, and any minor change is going to upset you. And it's somebody that's like, just Googling how to do this or where to go this. And those message boards are extremely popular. Their SEO is strong, and they end up there. You can get a very negative connotation to Disney World. It might make you, regret going or maybe not plan it, that type of thing. And there was one person in particular on the message boards, one of the threads, and they were saying, I haven't been in 20, 30 years. And we're booking for the first time, and they mentioned that is my old friend still going to be there because he has all these nice memories, that type of thing. And I responded immediately, and I was like, look, as long as you're not jaded by the price tag, I hope the message boards aren't shadowing or biasing your expectations of the trip coming up. But your old friend is still going to be there. It's going to be the same magic that you remember 20, 30 years ago. It's going to be the same old stories and some very much new ones as well. And it's still a place where you can, I'm sounding like Matt Pato now, being super positive, but I think there's some truth in that. But you had some things in mind, like very concrete things you wanted to
So,
measure, right?
what I want to say, like, yeah, it's definitely not the same, and some things are negative, but I think some additions or changes they've made have actually been for the better and actually can improve your trip. So I thought, let's not forget about these things, or like, let's try to remember these. So I was trying to think of, what's come up in the next, say, 5 or so years that I think has had a positive impact on Walt Disney World. And the first one that came to mind is something we've already mentioned on the show, but is the Skyliner.
Yes.
I think this is something that's really aided in transportation. It's made some moderate and value resorts much more easily accessible to the parks, which is great. It's not just you have to pay deluxe prices to get close to a resort, to a park. And I think it's just fun, and it add more kinetic energy just when you drive around and you see them flying by and stuff like that. The next thing I had on my list is that I just think overall the quality and variety of quick service food has improved across the board at Walt Disney World.
This is low key, like, and this is the second time I've said low key on this. This is like a low key, like, huge thing. Like, I never would have thought about this unless you pointed out. Because when I think quick service, it's buying a pretzel or a hamburger, or like that's what people associate quick service for. But I'm sure I'm going to be stepping on your toes with some of these things. But you think, what's quick service? You've got, the Harbor House at Magic Kingdom has some unique options. You've got Satuli's Canteen, which we've raved about all over the place. At Epcot, you've got plenty of the food booths and all the other different things that you can get in the World Showcase. Hollywood Studios, you got the ABC Commissary, which I thought, what did I say? That was my underrated quick service place last week, I think.
Yeah.
And I mean, and with the options that they've done to meet a lot of people's dietary needs, whether you're vegetarian or you only eat fish or whatever, that type of thing, it's expansive for sure.
Yep, exactly. And even some of the more like sort of quote unquote more regular places have more unique options. Like the Creations Cafe that opened has different flavors of pizza, including one that has sort of like Indian flavors and things like that. So there's just much more options. You can still obviously get your chicken fingers and stuff like that if you want it, but I think the quality and options has improved quite a bit in the last few years.
Let me hold on. But I just realized this. It's like, as the food choices have gone up in selectivity and options and uniqueness depending on where you go, the merch has basically gotten more and more bland, like in the opposite direction. Basically, you can get the same merch everywhere on property, and it's kind of completely gone in the opposite direction. And I'm wondering why that is, because typically for food service, you make more money by buying the same ingredients over a larger area, but there's been more diversity to the food that you can eat versus the merch, which is like the same plush as at Main Street it is at any of the shops in Hollywood Studios type of thing.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see a little, or we were, maybe things take, everything took a step back with the pandemic, but we're starting to see a little bit more, seeing more resort specific merch and stuff like that come
That's
back.
true.
So hopefully I agree. I think the pendulum definitely swung very far one way, and maybe it's starting to come back to the middle with that one. But speaking of food, another advancement, which I overall think is a positive. I know some people maybe aren't fans of it, but mobile ordering,
I
think is great.
When
Obviously if it's when it's a popular location, you might have to think about a little earlier in the day, like when you want to eat, but it's just great to look through the menu, kind of pick what you want, go through it, and then just go say you're here and pick it up and not have to wait really long. And low key, I also like when I can go to Satuli Canteen and order a kids menu with a kids meal with a beer.
That's it. Perfect. Well, I mean, like here's my thing with mobile ordering, and it goes towards our conversation about Genie Plus months ago. Is it's the whole project management side of things. This is why people hate it, right? Like the same reason why people hated doing 80 hours at 180 days is I don't know what I'm going to eat until I want to eat, right? And for mobile ordering to work well, sometimes you have to order it early, an hour before you want to pick it up. So you have to be thinking about lunch maybe before you're hungry or anything else like that. And that's more of the planning and the expectations, because some people with mobile, I'm just going to mobile order, and like, it's a 30-minute wait on mobile ordering. This stinks. But if you know ahead of time that it sometimes can take a half hour, be smart about it, set your expectations, and do it the right way. So there's a tip for everybody that has never done mobile ordering. Plan out where you might want to eat and start thinking about that, and you have to keep the app in front of you and look at the different times. It's more
so I definitely get why some people aren't fans of it, but I think overall and I do wish more places were more open to both options, that if you didn't want a mobile order, sometimes it feels like they're pushing it a little too much, but for those of for overall, I think it's a positive addition.
Yeah, for again, when we went to Harbor House, we walked in and I wanted to do mobile. We did a mobile order, right? But we walked in and we got online because I thought it was the line to pick up your mobile order. No, it was a line of like 20 something people waiting to actually order, and then I just got out of the line and went to the front and picked up my food and walked away. I felt kind of bad, but like more people need to use it.
Yeah.
So,
and along the same lines, mobile check-in at the resorts. I know this isn't necessarily something super unique to Walt Disney World, and I know some people still prefer to go and check in at the desk, but it's kind of a neat feeling, whether when you're flying in or something like that, and you check it, and you're getting notified on your phone when you land that your room is ready, and you don't even have to go to the front desk. Just go right to your room, scan your magic band or whatever, and you get in, and everything is, it just quickens the process.
You don't need a front lobby anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So this is one of the things I definitely think this is an improvement. Like if you want to streamline your check-in and check-out process where you can just go to your room, like it's ready for you. It's like coming home, right? You don't need to go somewhere permission to get to your hotel room. I dig it. This is a con in my sense of nostalgia and the way things are. My kids will never feel this, right? Because they're used to just going right to the room and that's it. Going into the lobby, getting your luggage, waiting online to get the keys or get checked in, to me, that's like part of the vacation. That's part of like, I am now here. Like it's one of these like clicks in my head saying like, I am now on vacation.
No, I hear you.
Right.
And I want the paper map where the person checking me in circles where my room is and tells me how to get there. And
this is why I could never get mad at somebody for, when something goes away at the parks, it's like, oh, I hate that going away because I always did it this way. I'm like, it's not a big deal. I mean, but like, these are the things that like connect you to certain memories and things like that. You could certainly still do that, right? You could get that rush of like, I'm here. But again, you go to the lobby, no one's in there, and you can just walk up and do it. It's kind of like, feels like you're cheating almost a little bit when you're doing that. I will say one thing though, that if there was ever an opportunity to get pixie dust and get upgraded to a room, you do have to physically go in and check in if you think that there might be a chance where you might get an
certainly your odds are much higher.
Yeah. So like, if you go in and, I hate people that game this system because there's definitely websites out there. It's like if you want an upgrade, you have to physically check in and stuff like that. But if anybody's going to notice, like you have a bunch of kids and they want to do something special for you, like put you in the mermaid room versus something else, that's never going to happen with a mobile check-in. It's extremely rare that it's going to happen anyway. So don't go expecting check-in like I'm definitely going to get a room upgrade type of thing. But it's not going to happen unless you go up there. But that's definitely not a reason. And I think this is also, like you said, a huge improvement in recent years. What's next?
So my next one, which I'm going to use your word, I think this is a low key
It's your
improvement.
second time you've used that word.
But at the parks, they've redone the bus parking situation at each of the parks, and they're just much more organized. It's a much more like it was built for this purpose. It's much more efficient. They have digital signs or whatever that tell you where to go. And I just think it's a much, it's still not perfect. Sometimes you still have to wait a long time for a bus or whatever, but it makes it feel like a much more controlled situation than I think it was in the past. So I think that really helps a lot.
I'm waiting for our December trip for when I've got 3 kids in tow. How leaving the park at night is going to be. Is it still going to be like I have to wait 3 rotations for buses, that type of thing? Because back in July, we didn't have to wait long at all. Like we got there, we were on the next bus. So they've done a great job. There wasn't massive amounts of congestion. Like everybody, like at Magic Kingdom, especially after they redesigned the whole thing, it's enough room for everybody to divert and walk. There's no thresholds or that you just people like kind of get bunched up or choke points type of thing.
Yeah.
I definitely think that. And at Animal Kingdom, I think Animal Kingdom is relatively new, right? The
Yeah.
way they did their buses. When I was there before, I'm like, oh, this is really nice. It was close to where the parks were. It wasn't that bad of a walk. I really enjoyed it. So I definitely think they've nailed the transportation out of the park for sure. No pun intended.
And then my last item that I had on my list, and I welcome Jason if you have any others that I didn't think of.
I do.
Is immersive lands. Now, that doesn't mean they're being done perfectly or anything like that, but with the addition of say Pandora, the world of Avatar, that was something like that never existed at a Walt Disney park. Like you had Adventureland, which felt like obviously it was immersing you in there, was themed well, but it wasn't as transportive as something like Pandora was or Galaxy's Edge, where it really makes you feel like you are in this land that just happens to have a couple rides as well or whatever, And I think that really takes that escapism just to another level. Now, I know some people prefer it the old way and that sort of thing, but I think this is something
Valid
new.
opinion.
And I think, obviously we're seeing it at Universal with the Harry Potter lands and stuff like that as well. Again, it's not unique to Disney, but they're doing it well, and it's something new. And I think we're only going to see more of it going forward. And I just think that's a big upgrade to what we've had in the past, and it's something new that people who, like you were mentioning, that person has been there in 10 years, think of all those new lands that it's going to be brand new to them to experience for the first time.
Specifically Galaxy's Edge and Pandora, the lands themselves could occupy an hour of your time when you go there for the first time. I mean, you're definitely right. The theming, the immersion, the transportation of yourself, not just on the ride, but the surrounding area is definitely a massive improvement. And to kind of piggyback on this, because I wasn't sure if this is what you were going to mention, the improvement in recent years is like people like want to yell at Disney for not adding anything new and being slow, especially in making fun of them because of Tron's construction,
Yeah, sure.
and all this other type of stuff. But if you take a step back and you look at the last 5 years at the parks, going back to 2017, they've added Pandora, they've added Galaxy's Edge, they've added Toy Story Land, they've added Mickey's and Minnie Runaway Railway, they've added Cosmic Rewind, they've added Remy's. I mean, they've added billions of dollars to these parks. Now, one could say that they should have been adding more, right, for increasing capacity.
Right.
And the argument is that's replacing rather than adding were a lot of these things. Definitely valid arguments. But they have been reinvesting in the parks themselves to kind of bring them up to spec. And if you want to go farther back, you have New Fantasyland as well. A lot of people like to focus on, oh, we saw this in the concept art, but it's 50% of what we were expecting, or whatever number you want to choose. A lot of people like to look at the negative because they're the expectations, right? So maybe this is what they're doing with the blue sky type of stuff, not setting expectations properly at this point. But in recent years, Walt Disney World has added a lot of new experiences. So if you're that person that hasn't gone in 30 years or hasn't gone in 10 years, there's a lot for you to do and explore, as somebody that hasn't been there before. So there's
Yep.
definitely additional value to your $120 ticket versus your, I don't know what ticket was, $80 ticket 10 years ago or 15 years
Yep.
ago that you might have been spending. You've got, while the transportation to the hotels is not there anymore, which is definitely lost. But the hotel rooms overall are at a higher quality than they've ever been, right? You've
Mhm.
got rooms with USB ports in them all over the place. In most of the moderate resorts, if not all the values, you've got better places for your luggage. There's they've really taken on, rather than having like just random stuff in a room, to make it more functional. People might complain that it doesn't have theming and it's not this, but they're functional rooms that are comfortable with high quality linens and mattresses. There's not a bad room on property, unless it hasn't been refurbed in recently. But yeah, they're excellent rooms, and they're basically the worst Hilton Garden Inn room is
Yeah.
probably what you'll find anywhere on property. And Hilton Garden room is one of my favorite, you know, business class type of
Yeah.
hotels that I stay in.
The functionality is so much better. I mean, I think I've mentioned this before, but when we had our couples only trip, we stayed at Pop Century for a number of nights, and then we did last couple of nights at Animal Kingdom Lodge, just a regular room, and that
Mhm.
hadn't been refurbished yet, and it really like was glaring in our face. Like the rooms are not as bright. There were like no plugs or outlets or
Yep.
anything. Like obviously everything was of a higher quality material because it was a deluxe versus a value, but I was like kind of missing the functionality of the value room versus the
Yeah.
unrefurbished deluxe room.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that now if everybody has a Magic Band Plus, you need at least 4 or 5
Yeah,
outlets extra per person than not just charging your
yeah,
cell phones and stuff like that. I think as much as everybody hates it, the communication, and makes fun of Disney because of their IT, their communication at Disney is much better than it used to be. Like you could find all your resorts and dining like with an app now. If you haven't been there in five or
sure.
10 years, you could do everything with the app, right? We complain that we do too much with the app now, right? But if you haven't been there in 5+ years, being able to book your Genie Plus or at Fast Passes before they went away, checking and booking dining and rearranging your reservations, linking your Magic Bands, doing the mobile check-in, all that type of stuff around the things that we've already mentioned makes a much better ecosystem. It's taken a long time for them to get
Mhm.
there, and from a technology point of view and an infrastructure point of view. Another thing that's much better, we're going on and on here because things are just popping in my head. The Wi-Fi has gotten so much better over
I
recent.
think even just in the last year or so, I
Yeah.
feel like it's gotten a lot better. Yeah.
So no longer are you kind of like lagging to kind of get those mobile orders type of thing.
Well, I remember when Rise first opened, and there were all these strategies to like, don't go on Wi-Fi; it's not good.
Yeah.
Like, use your data and stuff like that. And I think you're not hearing that anymore related
Yeah.
to like the virtual queues.
For sure. So no, there's a lot that has improved. So it's always nice to take a break to say what has changed for the better, rather than kind of saying I wish this or wish that. So, excellent topic, Phil. I want to get to this week's top 3 things. Our top 3. We're bringing it back. Because I liked it so much. It's a nice little tiny chunk of content here. This week's top 3 things in your backpack you cannot live without while at Disney World. I'm going to go quickly through my top 3, and a reason why. My first is a collapsible water bottle. I use one of these things for the first time, and traveling to and from the parks, the fact that you're not having a big bulky water bottle, if you finish it, you can collapse it, put it in your backpack. Um, Traveling with it to and from the airports is quite good. So I love this, and if you get the proper ones, and they're not that expensive on Amazon, they do a pretty good job at keeping everything either warm or cold that you put in there. Number 2, I think, is a must-have for anybody that goes into these parks, is an extra pair of socks. Not only because of the water rides that you might go on, because of the deluge of rain that you might have. And if you've seen any of the pictures in the last couple of months, Magic Kingdom and other places have started to have a lot of water accumulate on the ground, let's say, and keeping your feet nice and warm and dry is excellent. So an extra pair of socks is always a good thing. And people always mention bring an extra battery pack for your phones because the app kind of really sucks everything, all the power out of your phones. A must-have that I can't live without is a second battery pack. Because you never know if that didn't charge overnight, you forgot to plug it in after your day, you always have that backup. So have that backup battery ready for all of your trips, especially as your family grows and you have more and more people using their apps throughout the day. Especially if your teenagers or younger or slightly older kids have their own phones and they're doing all the Play Disney stuff, there's more reason to have that app out for your whole family. So you always need a second one. So those are my top 3 things that I can't live without in my backpack that I always make sure I bring with me. What about you, Phil?
So the first 2 thoughts I had for this, you covered, which was the water bottle and the battery pack. I think, mentioning having a second battery pack makes sense. So I'm definitely supportive of that, and also having water with you. But my other top 3 things that I would always have in my backpack, we always have some snacks, whether it's granola bars or fruit chews or something like that, for when the kids get a little hangry or a little grouchy or something like that. You don't have to, buy a $5 Mickey bar. You can have that snack available to you. My second thing is we always have sunscreen with us. We are fair skinned. I always joke. I go from my only colors are white, off white, and lobster red.
Yes.
So we are always the family reapplying sunscreen and stuff like that.
Well, let me ask you: are you a lotion person or a spray on person when it comes to
So
sunscreen?
we for most of it we use spray. We just
Same
find it
here.
a lot easier and get coverage. And then we have sticks that we use for our face.
Yes, I'm the same way. Okay, just checking.
Okay. All right, very important. And the last thing I put is I always carry a printout of my spreadsheet. You just never know when the Wi-Fi is not going to work or the app's not going to work or whatever. And if we're pulling up for that ADR, I can pull out my spreadsheet and say, no, there's my confirmation number. I'm set here. So that's the 3 things in my bag.
Yeah, I've always brought my spreadsheet, but it's never come out.
Yeah,
never had it. Luckily.
Yeah, I generally don't have it, but I prefer to have it. It's a comfort. It's like a.
Well, you spend that much time working on it. You want to bring it with you, right? You were like, "Aha! I've been successful." I can't wait for your trip report after your 3 days with Genie Plus and how that all kind of goes down.
I know.
I can't wait for that. It's going to be like a double duration show. I think it's going to be a 2-hour show to kind of break everything down. All right, so I want to get to this week's DBC engagement. This is going to be a quick one. But last week you brought up Oogie Boogie Bash as a different feel than the Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, West Coast versus East Coast. Would you want to see the Walt Disney World have a second Halloween event, not at Magic Kingdom, that's a little bit more grown up? Yeah, grown up in quotes. Maybe it's a little bit scarier. Maybe it's a little bit more spooky. Or maybe it's not just like candy and Mickey Mouse type of stuff.
Yep.
So if so, where would you do it and what would you include? Because this was your topic. You obviously have something in mind. So what are your feelings?
Yeah. So my idea was, because I'm not the type of person that something like Halloween Horror Nights appeals to. Like, I'm just not into like that level of scariness and gore and stuff like that. But I'm also not like, I don't want to pay all this money to go trick or treating, and like I wouldn't mind a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe it's just that I keep seeing all these images of Oogie Boogie Bash, and it seems to have that right tone for me. So I would definitely do something at Hollywood Studios. I think it's the right park for something like that. I would definitely, and I know some people raise this, that they didn't, every night that there's a ticket event, the park closes earlier. So now we're going to have 2 parks that are closing all the time. I definitely would alternate, and it wouldn't be double the dates now or whatever.
Yeah.
There'd be fewer dates at Magic Kingdom, and then some of these dates now would be at Hollywood Studios instead. But I would have a lot of the things, like I would have Oogie Boogie and the Nightmare Before Christmas stuff. I'd have, some of the takeovers for Toy Story Land. Maybe have Sid take over that and kind of have all like his kind of messed up toys and stuff like that go on there. Some of the theming, like they do such a great job theming Cars Land out in California Adventure. So I'd like to see some of that theming to the lands in Hollywood Studios, and it would be interesting to see what they would do in Galaxy's Edge. Maybe that's when the First Order takes over or something like that, and you have more of the stormtroopers and stuff going around. So
I think all of your ideas are good ones, but they will never do it that way. Right. Because this is how I think that you could easily do Hollywood Studios. Because I agree, that's the only other park that you can go to. You're not doing it at Animal Kingdom because the park's not going to be open that late unless you want to have like haunted, animal trail type of stuff, which I don't think they want to disturb the
It would
animals.
make for good. Well, actually, and I don't even know if you could have like the candy and stuff like that, just in case the animals get it or something like
Yeah,
that.
who
But I was
knows?
saying the walking trails would make for good trick or treating trails.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, for sure. I think, but at Hollywood Studios, I don't think you do it like you do the Not So Scary Party, right? I think it's an after hours type of party. So this happens
Okay.
after it closes. So you don't have two parks alternating. Like now you're forced to do with certain parks and certain nights because you don't
Yep.
get the full value. So I don't think you do two parks during the week at closing early. I think this is just at like 9 p.m. it starts, right? And I don't think you do. I don't think you change any of the lands. I think Toy Story Land is still Toy Story Land, et cetera, et cetera. But I think all the theming and stuff that you do starts at Tower of Terror, and it's only on the boulevards that things change. So you take like you just take the old Hollywood style stuff and you just spookify it, if that's
Oh, that'd be
if that's
cool.
the word, right? So you have different neon lights, you have different projections and stuff like that, and then you probably have a cool nighttime parade, and you can get downright scary with that type of stuff. So you just take the themes of ghosts and ghouls and all the type of stuff that would fit in Tower of Terror, Twilight Zone type of stuff, and you kind of do kind of spooky things like that. And there's a lot of little crevices down the boulevards where you can have like not jump scares, but like things kind of pop out and kind of come back in and kind of do like the oh gosh, what are the entertainers that are no longer there? The
Oh, the citizens of Hollywood.
Citizens of Hollywood. You can kind of do a take on that, but like the zombies of Hollywood or something kind of fun like that. But I think you leave the lands because retheming the lands or having the first order take over, that to me that screams very expensive, and I don't think Disney would ever do something like that. But I could see them kind of decorating the different boulevards up
No,
for
I like
kind of
that idea a lot. Like as more of a private event, almost like a Great Gatsby theme or feel to it, or
Mhm.
something like that, like a late dinner party type thing. That could be really cool.
And then because it's more old or more quote unquote grown up, it starts at 9 o'clock. So the little kids aren't asking to be there, or they're
Yeah.
most likely going back to being in bed. So this is more of like, young adult to, well, starting at young adult and going
Yep.
over for the type of stuff. So responses in the community were lackluster, but through no fault of them, because no one thought like no one wanted to compete with Universal because there was
Yeah.
you're not out Halloween horror nighting Universal, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Everybody loved no one needed an extra ticket event because most people aren't going to these ticket events anyway, so they don't want another park being closed. They don't want the any of that stuff because they didn't think that there was a need for it. Did you pick up any other kind of sense from the community
No,
that
I mean the only other
that?
thing some people like Herdomaniac and Lumpy were going back and forth, sort of like there's just a lot of other Halloween things going on in the areas, both in California and in Florida. So it's like if you really want to get to some sort of Halloween themed event, you can probably find one at the right level of scariness that you're looking for somewhere in the area. I did sort of like the idea that TL Madden had about using the Festival Center building near the UK, which I think is World Showplace,
Mhm.
and transforming that into some sort of like haunted house type thing. And I thought that could be kind of cool that even if, because that's kind of in the back, not even making it like an after hours event, just have it something that goes on that's there all the time that
Mhm.
people can go to. And maybe you can showcase like, here's how Halloween's celebrated around the world and stuff like that. So I think there's something like that. Maybe that's not really a different Halloween party, but that's something else they could do to
Yeah,
fit the season. I think that could be kind of cool.
I definitely agree with that. With that being said, I thought we were going to go late, but we did I knew the DBC engagement was going to be a short one. So we were
Yep.
right on target. We have not taken too much of your time, so we appreciate you listening. So next week or this week on DBC engagement, we're going to ask you, does Genie Plus need to be more expensive or make it more exclusive so it's not as overused, right? So part of that is how much more expensive does it need to be? What is more outrageous to you? What is not? I know you mentioned you were in one of the WDW Magic threads, and you were mentioning your trip to Dollywood over the summer. Some of the exclusive, I forget what you called it, but the line skipping thing that
Yeah.
you have is like $80 a pop. Essentially, it's not 22. So while everybody's going crazy with a $7 increase to this thing, no one has it
Yeah.
anywhere
Disney
near
still
as
has
cheap
by
as
far the
Disney.
cheapest option. Yeah.
Cheapest even in Disney properties around the world, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like even Paris has their function. I don't know if it's come fully back from the pandemic, but it was a $90 price tag to kind of do the something
Yeah.
like that. So that being said, what does Genie Plus need to be? right? Right now, it's just you're everybody's doing the same thing. I think there's going to be marginally less people, but again, not as many people. People are still going to buy it at $20, right? So to me, people are well. I'm going into the explanation. We're going to say that for next week. I'm sorry. I've got too much on my mind. Anyway, that's it for next week's. We're going to put all this up coming out on Tuesday, and everybody make sure you like and subscribe. Spread the word around. We welcome all the new members to Discord community. We thank you for joining. Thank you for listening and watching, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye all.